So I'm back.
Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for a quorum of the Board of Education to begin the meeting. Hello, everyone. It appears now we have a quorum of the board. I'm going to call to order this Board of Education meeting, Monday, December 7th, 2020. I want to welcome all of you to our first Board of Education meeting for December. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the community members in Hastings who are struggling with COVID, and particularly those who are employees of the district, and just acknowledge their struggle and to give them our support. In particular, our most latest group of those who tested positive weren't necessarily in the instructional part of our community, and those who we don't often think about as frequently as, but nonetheless entirely instrumental to the learning experience of our kids, so and the running of our district. So our hearts go out to them, and I hope each of them have a speedy and smooth recovery. So with that, Dr. Henning Piedmont, do you have any announcements?
I do. Good evening, Board of Education trustees, to our student representatives. I'd like to just point out a few things that are happening within these 12 days before we go into our winter holiday break. First, I'd like to just remind everyone that we have a book study on 21 lessons for the 21st century by Yuval Noah Harari. The first of the parts 1 and 2, the discussion of parts 1 and 2 was last week. It was a very invigorating discussion and a look at the influences of artificial intelligence and other disruptive technologies on how we live, and most importantly, what the workforce will look like for Sophia and her friends, Sophia and Sabine and others, and some of our younger students. So we'll continue that conversation on January 6th. So about 21 or so folks join Melissa Szymanski and myself, to kind of share their ruminations and sorts of some I guess trepidations about some of the advances in technology. So it's a great book to continue to our sort of theme of looking at that, how do our schools look in comparison to that image, and some of the ways that we need to sort of think about how we're intentionally, sort of shaping a conversation internally to address that. So, and we know that's underway. So January 6th is the study of parts 3 through 5. We have student focus groups that are meeting to support the youth committee associated with the Reform and Hastings Police Reform and Reinvention Task Force. Our first focus group is Wednesday, December 9th from 3 to 4. And the next is December 14th from 3 to 4. I've asked our building administrators to remind our students to participate. We really want our student voices represented in the feedback that will come to this task force. So I want to thank Joanne Reed-Stokes, Dave Gunton, and Detective Sergeant Robert Gagliardi for participating, and we will be the facilitators of that task force, and we have some other dates as well. So we'll be promoting that so that we can get as much student involvement as possible. On this Wednesday, we have a superintendent's PTSA and SEPTA chat. Starts at 4:30. Again, these are questions that parents submit in advance, which I think is a very sort of smart and efficient way to get as much feedback, as many questions as possible from families that then I distribute to the administrators, and we all, try to provide the responses to those questions. So we look forward to that session, and I want to thank the PTSA and SEPTA in advance for their continuous partnership with myself and the school district, Maureen and Melissa, and all of our administrators. We find that particular meeting and partnership very helpful to the community. Amy and John at Hillside are having a Hillside huddle to talk about, the plans for integrating first grade full day at Hillside. So that conversation will happen on December 10th on Thursday. So that should be a really thoughtful presentation, and that's an opportunity for parents to ask questions that they have, to put forth their questions and have them answered by Amy and John. On this Thursday, December 10th, I will be a panelist for the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association conversation, the piece that Hastings has in that group. There are two other superintendents who are involved, is to talk about the work that the Board of Education supported around teaching children to talk about race. So it's that kind of work doesn't happen unless a Board of Education supports it along with a superintendent. So I look forward to talking about that work. And I actually got an opportunity to stop by an 8th grade Courageous Conversations course, where some of the 8th graders talked about how important it is for them to take what they've learned in grades 6, 7, and 8 to the high school, so that when they encounter, situations, and they indicated that they will encounter other situations mostly outside, and they're going to draw upon what they've been learning to not be bystanders, but to be upstanders. So I thought that was, exactly what you want to hear students talk about, right? How to, when they hear someone make a disparaging comment about another student's race, ethnicity, gender, etc., they feel as though those courses have helped them to have the wherewithal to know how to address those things. So that was, I thought, a pretty neat, perspective to gain from supporting that work. On December 16th, the policy committee meeting will meet again to continue to discuss the compliance audit that was completed by the New York State School Boards Association. So we have a lot of work to do, and so we'll be presenting that information at our December 21st board meeting. Our next board meeting on December 21st will be an opportunity to review the calendar for the 2021 school year in terms of the broad strokes. Of course, the bargaining units come together first to look at those. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about on December 21st was, the presence of certain holidays that are part of our calendar. And we do have community members who have been, asking questions about why other types of holidays are not included, because there are 2 holidays in the New York City public schools, holidays that do represent the Muslim culture as well as the Chinese lunar year. And so we'll talk about, what's happening regionally, and we'll look at the holidays that are traditionally on our calendar, and perhaps ways in which we can begin to, if anything, certainly mention those on our calendar, have them listed if in fact we are in our conversation understand the philosophy of how those dates get on a school's calendar. I also would like to just remind us all that we're not in the yellow zone yet. I hope we never are. But if we do, we certainly have done all the work that we, yes, Mr. Galan, clap again. We are not. That's a good thing. We're not in the yellow zone, which means we won't start, the testing, and from what I understand in other districts that have begun the testing part is in and of itself is not the difficult part, the logistics, although there are a lot of hours for startup. There are a lot of hours to, to finalize it because there is a data processing piece. We do have to upload all of those test results into the state system, the same one that the state uses to, produce all of the records that we see. So we hope we don't have to do that, but we're as prepared as we can. And I want to thank all of our nurses who have been, so extraordinary in their efforts to make sure everything is done the way it should be. As you know, they are a major force in the contact tracing efforts that we have to undertake whenever we hear that a student tests positive. They are the ones who are calling the health department, obtaining all the information from the building leaders. As you saw, things happen through all, they just don't happen during the course of the work week, right? Monday through Friday, things are happening on the weekends, and our administrators are very much involved. So I want to thank them and our nurses and everyone who, works so hard to make sure that we consistently stay on top of these matters, that we are informed, that we inform our, our community so that you're aware as well, and obviously our educators, faculty, and staff, everyone. So thank you all very much, and I think that that's the extent of the comments from me.
Thank you, Valerie. Melissa, do you have comments this evening from curriculum?
I do. Good evening, everyone. So first, thanks to a recommendation from Doug Sondheim, we've been working with Civics Unplugged around a potential fellowship opportunity for our high school students. The mission of this organization is to empower the leaders of Generation Z to build the future of American democracy. Accepted fellows will participate in a 5-month civic leadership program focused on providing resources, training, and a community. We do have a student information session tomorrow. We have a number of students that have signed up, but for those who are still interested, Tuesday, December 8th at 3:30 p.m. We've already had actually 3 students apply. We're hoping for some more. During this week's diversity committee meeting, we introduced the culturally responsive sustaining education framework to the group, and we charged participants with determining how they would incorporate it into the work they do in their various roles. And this afternoon at Chair Council, we began this work as well. I do see a couple of Chair Council members on the call, and I just wanted to say it was a pleasure learning alongside of you today. The K-12 Mathematics Committee met together last week. The focus of the session work was to engage in collaborative inquiry grounded in leadership, teaching, and learning artifacts within small breakout groups. We deepened our understanding of the standards for mathematical practice, examined how they're currently being brought to life, and considered opportunities to enhance student learning through shifts in our practice. And then finally, I've been hosting monthly curriculum hours, a voluntary collegial professional learning forum for faculty members. And our most recent sessions centered around assessment. It was attended by administrators, teachers, and a teaching assistant from across the 3 buildings. And themes from the discussion included iterative grading, involving students in the design of assessments, reducing fear of failure, and the design of authentic, interesting tasks. So that is it from our office. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Maureen, did you want to share anything with the board?
Sure. I just have one comment, and then I'll be later sharing out about the Finance Committee, which will touch on some of those other areas as well as the capital. One item I did want to share with the board is that there will be, in the next month, there'll be an update presented to the board as well as the community to our district-wide safety plan. It is a new requirement that we've been aware of, and we've been working through it. We're required to have a section on pandemic planning. So that will require us to have another public hearing around that, similar to the one we did in September. This is now an amendment to that plan, but it'll be like a readoption of the entire plan. So I just wanted to mention that I'll be presenting a draft of that to the board in the next month or less. And then from that point, we'll be posting for another public hearing. But that is, some people may have read that is a requirement of the school safety plan. And because of that, that has to be done before April 1st of this year. And then also this evening, as Valerie had mentioned, with the testing, we have been busily recruiting some additional nurses to both help us in preparation for that, as well as the need to have additional substitute nurses, especially when that they've been working really tirelessly. And if any of them either ever needs a day off, in order for us to really be able to function, we do need to have our full nursing staff. And then, as I mentioned, I will give an update during our finance committee report out, as well as a capital update later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Hello, Sophia. Would you like to share the student report?
Yes, Sabine is also here.
Great. If Melissa, are you able to add her? Sabine Hinkate.
Okay, hi everyone. Just a few updates from our student organizations. National Art Honor Society craft kits should be coming out next week, and those are art kits that come with materials and video instructions from a National Arts Honor Society member. The Environmental Club is organizing an art contest in the middle school to raise awareness about endangered species and organizing an endangered species workshop for elementary schoolers. Amnesty International will be hosting a letter writing workshop to politicians next week. And finally, the Student Union has organized a Candy Cane Candy Gram fundraiser. People pay $2 to have a candy cane and a message delivered to another student. So that's all from me.
Yeah, so students, I think, are really trying hard to make the best of things, which is nice to see. But I think the past week, the school itself kind of felt zombie-like. In several of my classes, I was one of 2 or 3 students actually physically in the building. From a student perspective, it feels like there's an initial group who have COVID fears due to Thanksgiving, or they're quarantining before break. And then there's a second wave of students who don't want to go in to take a test one day, or don't want to go in because none of their friends are going in. And the first few times when you're the only student in class, it's kind of fun, but it's not so fun anymore. So there's been buzz from students asking why, if so few kids are in class, why we can't go every single day. And also, students are hoping, I think at least the students in school are hoping more students start coming after January. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. It's always helpful to hear your perspective. We'll open it up for public comment. In this comment period, this is an opportunity for anyone attending the meeting to state if they're a resident of Hastings and their name. And at the beginning, this public comment at the beginning of the meeting is to discuss any items that are on our agenda this evening. And you have a limit of 3 minutes. If there are any additional comments you have that are outside of our agenda this evening that are pertaining to district business, you can participate in the second public comment, which comes at the end of the meeting. So if you would like to comment on anything in our agenda this evening, please use the raise your hand feature, and Melissa de la Barrera will call on you to participate.
Sarah? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sarah Walters, and I've been teaching English at Hastings High School since 2003, and I've been living in Hastings since 2009. I definitely echo what Sophia was just saying about a big difference that everyone is feeling after Thanksgiving, and it certainly impacts the way we are feeling in the classroom and the way we're getting to connect with students as well. But my reason for speaking this evening, and I wanted to read a letter that I had sent to all of you here at the end of last week, comes from a desire from the teachers and staff to be able to protect our families in the 3 days right before the winter holiday, in the same way that families in the community are being able to make that decision themselves. So I'm just going to read the letter that I wrote, and here it is. The number of students in the building at the high school after Thanksgiving is markedly fewer, since more than 40% of students have chosen all remote instruction. The challenge of engaging students when the majority are at home for many classes is daunting, but we are no less committed to our students. While we fully support and understand the decision that families are making to keep their students at home, we wonder why teachers are not being considered in this desire to protect their own families. We are writing to see if the board would consider choosing all remote instruction for the district on December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, so that we too might limit our exposure to possible asymptomatic or positive individuals. If teachers and staff work through December 23rd, we will not be able to safely quarantine, or even worse, might be exposed at school prior to the holidays, and then could face the holiday break on quarantine. Please remember that just before the Thanksgiving break, 45 teachers from Hillside went into quarantine and were not able to spend the holiday with others. And I will just say, this was not in letter, some teachers who live alone also have reached out to me that they're really concerned about the prospect of spending the holiday break by themselves.
Sarah, you have to wrap it up. You have 3 minutes.
Teachers are not wanting to work less, nor would students experience fewer school hours if we went all remote on December 22nd, blah, blah, blah. Students would follow their class schedule, and teachers would teach the exact same minutes that they would if they were in the building. Teachers who prefer to teach from the building could do so from their classroom without exposure to other students. It's probably 30 more seconds. On Monday, we taught with the windows open and masks on while rain and wind blew into our classrooms. We tried to keep students dry and find humor in the situation, but it is really difficult. The banners and signs stating "You've got this" and "We love our teachers" are good reminders of the fortitude we possess, but morale is waning. Allowing
Okay.
stuff to be virtual.
We have to limit those comments.
Okay, so I hope that you will seriously consider this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Now we have Kafira Wilderman.
Hi, thank you. My name's Kafira Wilderman. I'm a resident of Hastings. I learned this evening that Hillside's plan to bring the first grade back full-time in January requires the hiring of additional staff. Before those appointments, which I believe are on the agenda tonight, are approved, I'm speaking to ask the Board of Education to please examine the breakdown of COVID expenses that have been designated to each of our schools. As you know, last year, the decision was made not to replace a retiring Farragut Middle School science teacher and a high school language teacher. This decision resulted in cuts to language and science offerings at the high school, including multiple science electives, leaving students unable to register for electives and instead having to take study halls to fill out their schedules. High school parents have been told that the district is unlikely to have funds to reinstate those positions, yet Hillside announced today that an additional aide will be hired for each of its first grade classes to facilitate all in. Hillside also announced that it will need to make building accommodations to bring in additional students. The district has limited resources, and while I understand that our youngest learners are a priority, I ask that you ensure that our district's limited resources are distributed equitably among our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbara Rizzo. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. My name is Barbara Rizzo. I'm a very long-time resident of the village of Hastings. I want to piggyback off of what Kafir spoke of before the board goes ahead with the hiring of extra monitors due to the first grade being considered being brought back all in after the holidays. I find it just very curious timing as a parent of a child at Hillside, where we're getting practically daily phone calls about positive staff cases at Hillside, that now is the time to bring more children back into the building. It also seems that money will need to be spent to get the spaces available to these students, as the space doesn't currently exist at Hillside as it is. So money to get the building ready and money to hire more aides. Back in August, children with IEPs were granted full-time, full-day schooling throughout all three buildings. And while at FMS and the Hastings High School, that has been able to happen, at Hillside, this has been interrupted multiple times. And each time it's been due to staffing. So it just, again, very curious how we're able to hire more staff to allow the first graders to come back all in, but something that was promised to our children with IEPs back in August hasn't been able to come to fruition on a regular basis yet. And we're just looking at the equity in that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Toby Linder.
Hi, I'm Toby Linder. I wasn't sure if this was a first comment or second comment. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, but I guess it's a first comment. While I am loath to pit schools against schools, I feel compelled to bring up and defend the high school. With last year's budget cuts, the high school was hit hard, particularly the science department. The decision not to hire someone to replace the retiring FMS teacher, Mr. Vaccaro, resulted in 2 high school teachers being sent down to FMS for 5 classes. That's a 1 full-time equivalent. And significant cuts to the sciences at the high school, particularly the physical sciences. Full year classes and elective classes were cut. We had students who do not get a wanted seat in chemistry. We have students sitting in study halls due to lack of any spots in remaining electives. And electives are really, really important. I'm not sure people understand how important they are. The block schedule at Hastings High School allows for 8 classes. There really are 5 core classes: math, history, language arts, science, and foreign language. Many, many students fill their schedules with electives. These electives keep our students engaged. They help our students find their passions, and they help our teachers find fulfillment. Last year, it was said that everything that could be done would be to restore the cuts to the science department. But I'm getting more and more concerned that our limited resources are not being spent equitably. My comment is intended to bring up how the prior cuts impacted the high school and plead that each time an expenditure is asked for, it is considered in the broadest sense. Please do not forget about our high schoolers. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Destin.
Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is Jennifer Destin, and I live on 140 Fairmount Avenue. I was also surprised, to be honest, a little bit to hear about the hiring of more staff as well as some suggestion to some sort of building or construction of walls or something that seems likely to cost money. Given the conversations we've been having since the budget discussions last year and through COVID this year. I know it's hard to prioritize. I know it's difficult. Every age and stage has its different needs. But I do want to really ask the board that perhaps there is a need to look at the additional price per child it's going to cost to bring these 81 first graders back into the building, and then think about whether or not those costs could be also spent on other grades who may be experiencing something different. It's concerning that I feel that we have been very focused. And again, I understand the reason why, but we have such a limited pot of money. I believe at one point there was the discussion as to why we couldn't hire more aides or substitutes to allow children who were in the high school be in the building when their teachers were remote. It all goes back to money, and every dollar that's spent in one place isn't being spent somewhere else. So before any decisions are made, I again implore the board to look in the broadest way possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have another hand up. Erica S. Please state your last name so that I can note it. Thank you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to come on and say at the board meeting that I completely understand all the viewpoints and the position of all of the parents of various different age students in the district. And I am a parent of a first grader, and I just would like to reiterate what I said at the last board meeting, that if our first graders continue in the AM/PM model for the rest of the school year, by the time they enter second grade, they will have been in school for only 8 months. And we also don't know if they will even have full-time school next year, which would then put them third in line for any prioritization. I would hope that the district could answer the needs of all of the students, but I would just like to reiterate that this is also a huge consideration for parents of first graders. In addition, my first grader is completely unable to manage any of her work independently at any point throughout the day, therefore putting a huge burden on us as parents and caregivers. That's all. Thank you.
Erica, if you could please state your last name for Melissa so she
can.
Oh,
sure. Erica Surson.
Thank you. Okay, I have, sorry, Jamie Karen. Jamie, Karen, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. Hi. My last name is Declan, D-E-K-L-I-N. I just wanted to quickly echo what Sarah said at the beginning and ask that we might consider going remote from December 21st on to give our teachers and staff the best possible chance to be with their families for the holidays. I feel like they've already sacrificed so much, and it's a small sacrifice for us to make for them for the holidays. That's it.
Thank you. And next I have Michelle Veyvoda.
Hi, thank you. I wasn't planning on speaking and I don't have much to say. I just wanted to comment on two things I've heard tonight. First of all, I'm the parent of I live in Hastings, and I'm the parent of a fourth grader and a first grader. And just because there have been comments about the first graders coming back in person, I just wanted to add a voice of advocacy for bringing them back, because as someone said previously, not only can my son not do any of his work, but he also, partly because of his age, has real aversions to being on the screen and to people seeing him on the screen. And thus he really hasn't had access to, on full remote days, he doesn't have access to an education at all. He refuses to do it. On AM PM days, he just does not have access to really whatever is going on for half the school day. So I just wanted to, again, reiterate kind of the special challenges of young children being expected to learn so much material on a screen, which he and his first grade peers have been having to do since halfway through their kindergarten year. In addition, I just wanted to voice my support for the teachers having the opportunity for remote learning the few days before Christmas. I know my family is planning to take advantage of the district's leniency, and I don't see why teachers shouldn't have that same opportunity, especially since it seems that so many families are choosing it. Thank you.
I just want to remind all participants in the meeting that if you could please keep these public comments to items addressed in our agenda. We do have time for 2 other commenters on items in our agenda. And if there are any additional comments on any other pieces of district business, if you could please participate in the second public comment. Thank you.
We have one more hand up, Peter Scotch. Peter, can you unmute your-
Hi there. Sorry. I was just speaking with Sarah Walters, and I just want to read the last 4 lines of her letter to make sure that that was all included in the minutes of the meeting. They were that she asked that she said allowing staff to be virtual for 3 days sends a clear message to teachers that you care about our physical and mental health. We are not lessening our resolve to be committed to our students, but we are asking to please let us, like our students, be able to limit our exposure before winter break so that we may also have the opportunity to safely be with our loved ones. Please seriously consider this proposal. And then she signs it by herself, but she says the grade level and department level leadership below shared this letter with their departments and teams, and there's unanimous agreement and support of this proposal. I want to thank you all for listening to that and for considering it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's all for public comment.
Thank you, Melissa. We'll next move on to our business items. Does anyone have any questions regarding business items 1 through 9?
I just wanted to ask for a little clarity around the IT services. I read through the documents, but if you all could just talk to us a little bit about what your hope is for that.
Do you want me to, Valerie, do you want me to start? Okay, so as you may be aware, we currently do have a management contract with BOCES that helps provide us support in our instructional technology, and as do many districts in the region. And but the model we had was considered a collaborative support model, and really what that did is put more resources here, and they were really the way the contract was and things, how things have evolved. By moving to a managed IT model, it allows us still to have support in the district, but it moves a lot of that support out to the RIC, which in turn is actually a less expensive model and allows you to kind of create a different model in the tech department. Because I think what they've realized, that as many people have, there is a need to have certain people in the district, but much of the managing of our technology infrastructure can be managed in a way that that they have the resources at the back end and they can do much of that work from, remotely. So it kind of requires less in the district kind of management, and allows them to really streamline and really focus teams on project management of all of our different technology. It provides like a structure that will help us to have more resources and at a less expensive model, because you're really sharing those resources more broadly across districts instead of having a heavier resource team in district. It's really to do with the support of the back end of technology, not so much the instructional technology, but the actual working of our system.
I see. And because we don't have a director of technology, then this is sort of fulfilling some of what that role would be.
Not really.
Or that's a separate.
No. This is really to do with the management of the actual physical structure of our technology and the way it's being managed, which, as in a lot of places, those resources, because they can manage multiple districts, and pool those resources. So it's a better model, a more efficient model for districts to receive that type of tech support, where because of the way servers are, and we have a lot of our work goes through BOCES, so it's really having them manage back at the RIC inside the teams, having that kind of like higher level support, which our system is kind of set up to, because now a lot of things are similar and streamlined, and they can be, instead of being managed locally, which is a more expensive model in terms of managing the actual physical technology. This contract actually reflects a reduction in actually support of that type of infrastructure, because they get a benefit from managing those remotely, and then, utilizing teams to support multiple districts. Does that make sense? It's a more efficient model of support, I would say, but it also allows you to have a higher level of expertise around many areas of technology. Because it's being managed by different so they have teams there that may be an expert or it's like a VoIP team. So that's our telephone system, the voice over IP, and then there's a wireless team and a Mac team, and well, you're kind of sharing those resources with other districts, which is more efficient, because much of what can be addressed remotely. Right, okay. Through logging into servers and managing that. You of course need to have a physical presence in the district as well, but what we're really doing, instead of having we're kind of being more efficient in a shared resource. I would say that's kind of the managed IT model is a more efficient model to support the infrastructure.
Okay.
It's where we are at this point, and as Maureen said, it is. We outgrew the last, model, if you will, and this clearly is more aligned to our needs, especially in a situation where we don't have a director of technology, which districts do have to help even make decisions, because there's still decision making that has to take place. So unfortunately, Maureen, has a big part of that, that work that takes place with that team, because someone has to be directing, the group of people who are part of that partnership, to be aware of our priorities and, and our, sort of long-term goals. Melissa Szymanski is involved from the instructional standpoint in terms of the numbers of digital resources that we have and the management that's associated with that. So we still are looking at a way to help, to get the help of, some oversight over the work that is happening with the Lyric, and that oversight would be to help us develop our technology plan, which, is not just a technical, endeavor, but it really is a way of articulating where we're going, as a school system. So that, we need someone to help us with that sort of bigger picture, kind of work. And we just need to be able to continuously look at whether, how we're using the resources that we do have. We know we don't have the resources for director of technology. That certainly would, be ideal in an environment where, we are truly in the age of digitization. We're not going backwards, but, we don't have, that's not what we have that we can afford. But we can look at some other ways to make sure that, that someone is providing the leadership over, the Lyric, which is, part of every district. I don't know a district that doesn't use Lyric, but the difference is they do have a dedicated administrator, to oversee all those moving pieces. And so, as I said, we are looking at a way to make sure we have someone to help us do a number of things. We need, to have within our technology plan, a long-term plan for training for students on digital citizenship, with our educators and others who are, using the tools in different ways. Cybersecurity that training has to be something that's done consistently. As Maureen mentioned, there's project management related work, and we just need to understand, the ways in which we can do that efficiently. And, and having someone, since, Maureen, Melissa, nor I have that expertise, there are people there, organizations that do have that expertise. So we will be using them to just make sure that, the best decisions are being made, and most efficiently and affordably, but most importantly, long-term, they represent the direction and the pathway that we're going.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. And I also just wanted to check in about the inclusive schooling. I think they came once, either at the end of last school year or the beginning of the summer for professional development. And I just wanted to check in with you to see how that went, and if there are any tweaks or what you think about the upcoming training.
Can I just interrupt here for a second before you answer? I also wondered, I'm assuming at the end of the training, we also got feedback from the teachers or whoever it was that participated. And could we get some sense of what the feedback was from what they did provide in June?
We did, yes. So I've been working closely with Laura and Tesfa around this. And the timing of the training last year was tricky. I think it was necessary as we were moving into the school year, given some shifts with the schedule and some things that we needed to be thinking about from a space of equity to be supporting all of our learners and our teachers to be able to be doing that. The feedback that we got at the end of last year was mixed. And I think in general, and again, it was predicated on the fact that timing was tricky with it too. But we learned that what would be helpful is more specialized, differentiated training. And so the professional learning that we crafted for this current school year, when we had inclusive schooling and we were engaged in the planning session, there was also teacher voice there too. So we were brainstorming around the needs of the system and what would be beneficial. What you're seeing today with the cross-contract request is really specialized so that for the upcoming school year, it's specific to the ICT teams, so those teachers, and also our new inclusion facilitator. So that is fully differentiated, and it is to support her in real time as she stepped into this new role.
So we'll input. I'm sorry, go ahead, Allison.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do we get input from her or from the people who will be in the training about what their needs are or what they would find to be helpful?
Yes, that's the plan. I mean, with the inclusion facilitator specifically, it's crafted around working directly with her. So it is personalized and it will be based on what she's experiencing. It's also that the role of inclusion facilitator is new to our district. It was one of the recommendations that came out of the inclusive schooling and the work that they were doing to look at the system. So it's both about the structure of the role and thinking about the potential of the role and really being personal, meeting Kristen Kumar where she is. She's the person in the role currently. So it will be, she will be basically the person who's interfacing with the organization to talk about her needs, what's working, what's not working, receive some coaching feedback, and to make sure that she's in a good space and receiving the support that she needs to be successful and grow in her role. So yeah, that's the crux of it. And in terms of the ICT teams, that is also the intention, to make sure that there are some inclusive schooling as an organization that's coming with a wealth of expertise, also working with our ICT teams, thinking about what they're grappling with. So it is more differentiated. It is definitely, in the case of the inclusion facilitator, completely personalized. But that is something that we are committed to, making sure that we're having some voice in what's beneficial to people. And we're continuing to administer feedback surveys. And that's not just with inclusive schooling. You know, I'm thinking, you know, our recent mathematics committee, for example, we're doing lots of entry tickets, exit tickets, to be able to see where people are, how they're perceiving their role as learners, and to see what's working and what we can improve upon.
Is it at all appropriate for some of the core teachers in middle school to attend, you know, along with the inclusion facilitator, or that's cross purposes?
So this is really specific to working with the inclusion facilitator. I think with the ICT teams, that's where we're seeing more of like the general educator and special educator and how they're bringing different co-teaching models to life and supporting them in the classroom. But that other piece really is specific to the inclusion facilitator role.
But with the ICT teams, I just mean the other general ed teachers wouldn't necessarily be attending because they're not in an ICT class. Is that?
That's correct.
So like teachers who had participated before may not be participating now?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Can they choose to if they want to, or?
You know, it's something that I can explore with Laura and Tesfa. I have to say, if we're offering professional learning and it's something that works, we have to look at the system in terms of teacher coverage and when things are
I see. Yeah.
Being able to operationalize it. But I always personally feel that if people are hungry for professional learning, we find a way to make it happen somehow. So whether it's a different way of working with the resource or some sort of turnkey by cultivating some expertise. But I am a huge fan of, as much as we can, involving people in the process. So if they're interested, in addition to the ICT teams, we'll figure out a way to do something to help with that.
And there are multiple opportunities. So this is the first time. So this is a continuation of the work that ended in June. So we had the workshop on why inclusion, which was every teacher at Farragut. There was a session that was dedicated to, there was one other workshop that was offered during that time. Why inclusion was one of them, and there was some independent work happening with some teachers specialized to the teachers who were working with students with IEPs. So those were our priorities. And with this version of it, which was also a part of that contract and part of those recommendations that came out of the program review conducted at Farragut, was the focus on making sure that we built the capacity of the inclusion facilitator, because it's a new role to Kristen. So we wanted to make sure that she was functioning at a level where she felt comfortable and a sense of, efficacy when she worked with, the various teachers. And then as Melissa indicated, there are, the focus on the work with the co-teachers. In my own experience, it's best to do that with the partnership, with the people who are partnered together. And then, if that's a need, in the future where we have other teachers who might end up being the co-teacher, that certainly is an opportunity to loop back and include them into the work. So, it isn't sort of, one time and that's the only time that something like that will be available. Similar to the CPI work that Laura Sullivan and Tesfa Stewart are doing on, de-escalation strategies. If those occur, they are offering those types of workshops regularly, all throughout the year, because it's just, the strategies are not ones, where once you learn them, you're kind of like set for life. So the same thing applies with, any of the learning around the work with students with IEPs. We want to make sure that we keep expanding the ripple so that more people learn the ways in which we can better differentiate. So our educators at Farragut, engaged in some work with differentiation, which is really important, but that needs to continue, similarly, because it is so integral to, really in supporting the needs of different learners and being able to successfully ensure that we really are building an inclusive learning environment where children, have access to rigorous course taking, and there are no barriers to their ability to succeed, and that we're also using, and certainly under Melissa's work, a focus on really being able to mine the data and understand what stories are told through the data about student performance and their pathway forward. So that's also a really important part of all of this.
Thank you.
And also that it has the opportunity to be immediately embedded. So having that work with the ICT teachers around co-teaching and then living in that role currently to be able to take what they're learning right away and have it be a practical application. And that is a piece of feedback that we received, that having that practical component is really, really important. And people are valuing that, to be able to then take something and go right back and apply it. And similarly with the inclusion facilitator as well.
Sure. Thanks.
Are there any additional comments or questions about business items 1 through 9? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 9?
I think Jeremy raised his hand. JT.
I didn't see it. Is there a second? Now I see.
Second.
All in favor? And I just want to add, I'm very pleased that we've approved the gender spectrum professional learning. Not that I know that organization in specific, but that that we have a proposal to provide professional learning in this area of gender differences and gender nonconformity. I think it will add a lot of benefit to the students and the adults in the district. Moving on to placement and services for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions about these placements? Is there a motion to approve the placements for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor? We'll move on to appointments. I don't know if Valerie or you, Maureen, if you could provide some clarity regarding the positions that that are listed here as aides.
Yes.
And then also regarding number 12, the appointment of Joseph Acaro.
Sure. So I'll just speak first about the aides. There are no full-time aide appointments on this evening's agenda. I know Amy did share an update, about Hillside's plans. The monitors that are being hired here are not related to Hillside School, about the first grade at all. We are still working on hiring additional aides for the middle school, in particular, where the aides and monitors, especially as we enter into having multiple areas for recess and lunchtime. So that did require an increase in those monitors. Every monitor on this evening's agenda is actually being placed at the middle school, and they were hired for that purpose. And then the other appointments this evening, I had mentioned them a little bit earlier. My comments this evening are for those substitute nurses, and we've explained, the need, and that really is district-wide. And first and foremost, we really needed to beef it up in thinking about the potential for testing and just for nursing substitutes. Valerie, I didn't know if you wanted to speak about the science appointment this evening, because
I will. Yes, that would be good. Thank you. So I want to thank Melissa Chandra for keeping in touch with Joe Vaccaro, because of her, we were able to, he knew that this position was available in terms of, the lead replacement for Dan Brownstein. And so we have someone here, as you know, it's very, very tough to find a certified active, science teacher, specialized science teacher, particularly an earth science teacher. And so he had an assignment elsewhere. And obviously he, is still connected to Hastings and was very much eager to return. He does have a commitment still until January 16th, and then starts here in the district on the day after. I think it's January 18th or 19th. He will be able to assume the responsibilities for the teacher who is here, who was serving as the lead replacement for Dan Brownstein. He will also be able to, we're waiting to hear from him this week with regards to a earth science interventionist position to support some of our students in 8th grade who had some difficulty in the first quarter in earth science. So we hope that his schedule would permit him to serve in that role, which will be very important. And it'll also help us to potentially see, based upon, looking most immediately at the needs of the students in earth science. Jennifer and Kevin will be working very closely with Joe to make sure that, we support the science needs at the middle school. And then we're able to look at, potentially if there's the availability, perhaps, Melissa Shandroff, Joe, Louis DiPietro, and Melissa Hardesty can also look at any potential, availability in Joe's schedule. So we will have him fully for, from January to June. Those are sort of the ways in which we expect to use his expertise and time. Maureen, Lynn, and I had an opportunity to talk to Joe, meet with Joe on Friday, and he's very, enthusiastic about returning and working with students. As for those of you who don't know him, he was, an amazing educator. He still is, and has a reputation of working, taking sort of these abstract, content areas and really making them accessible to students who ordinarily, might, have some difficulty. So we are really thrilled, to have him come back after retiring from the district after many successful years. And so thank you.
And we are, as Valerie said, we're, that's a commitment through the end of June. So if Dan were to return, it would offer other opportunities as well in the science department.
Thank you, Maureen and Valerie.
Quick question on, I know there's no aides on this agenda, but do we need to hire anyone to open up first grade? Is that going to be something that we see on future agendas?
Well, I think we wait to see Amy's presentation at the huddle. I mean, I think she did provide some information. It does require some movement, to accommodate, the classrooms for first graders all day. So we certainly have, utilize our teacher aides, teaching assistants and monitors to support, students being in Hillside for, more time. And so they are extremely helpful and useful and vital at, for the younger learners. I don't know the specifics, Jeremy, about exactly who, but, I can't, I do know that, it does require, some additional, movement of students, and that alone may require that there are some supplementary, monitors or teacher aides who, we have hired throughout, since we opened. So we have been hiring them, across the board, for K through 8. So as I said, I don't know the specifics about, what Amy's needs are, but certainly, we do know there are some pieces that do require us to, to socially distance students and to make sure that we lessen density, throughout, even similarly to how we manage the kindergarten students.
Right. And just like Valerie said, we haven't seen the full presentation, but anytime you have more time with students in the building, it does require additional supervision. So that may require, whether it be, it's an addition of hours, and, any students would be an all day, which again, right now we're utilizing people with the split in students, but when you increase the amount of students, there typically would be an increase of hours of support somewhere in that mix.
And we may even see that at the middle school as the weather changes on us and we have to have children indoors. We have to manage the lunch lines where, children line up to get their food as well as to pay. We have to make sure that there's staff there to manage the social distancing for children. So we will use our staff, the ones that we have hired, but there is a possibility each time something happens where we increase the density someplace in the district, it does require us to deploy staff to support the social distancing that's necessary, to manage, where our students are, and especially in some of the larger spaces.
Are there any additional questions regarding the appointments 1 through 12? Is there a motion to approve the appointments 1 through 12?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Sorry, I'm muted. We'll move on to the amendments. There are 3 amendments. Are there any questions or comments regarding these 3 amendments? Is there a motion to approve these 3 amendments?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? And we'll move on to the leaves of absence. There are 4 leaves of absence. Are there any questions or comments about these leaves? Is there a motion to approve the leaves of absence 1 through 4?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? We have the minutes from the November 23rd, 2020 meeting. Are there any questions or comments about these minutes? Is there a motion to approve the Board of Education meeting minutes from November 23rd, 2020?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, and next we'll move on to the Finance Committee, which met earlier this evening. Maureen has added to the agenda the presentation that she shared with the Finance Committee. And Maureen, did you want to give a brief overview of what we discussed?
Sure. We don't necessarily need to go through the entire presentation, but it is here. And really tonight, we just started out mostly with speaking about the tax cap, because now we have a good sense of what that will end up being. So we kind of started a discussion tonight and just kind of framing our budget discussion as we're entering into the budget season with our budget leaders, and also started to kind of talk about, what would that mean in the tax cap, and looking at, some projection models of both our revenues and expenditures. And again, they're all in the slide deck. So, obviously with the board, it's a lot to digest, but, if you have any questions about the slide deck, of course, always feel free to reach out. Valerie and I discussed how we are, kind of in addition to starting the budget process with our folks here, that we're also starting to develop, talking with our budget 101, and just trying to kind of really start looking at our 5-year plan in terms of the tax cap and the limitations around that, and what does an increase beyond the tax cap look like. We spoke a little bit about fund balances and how they work, and how the appropriated fund balance in particular, and how, you know, what role does that play in the budget, and, you know, about thinking about, again, as we're thinking about future budget years, and thinking about, you know, the ability to either have dollars to offset it, and, you know, how we need to start thinking and developing our budgets, and, you know, kind of just to try to, talk about how last year was such a tough budget year, and just kind of thinking about, you know, what we're thinking about going forward in this year, and the difficulty of living under the tax cap, especially in a year in which it seems it's right now tracking below 2%. So that's kind of just, I just wanted to kind of just touch points on the presentation there is for everybody to can kind of look at it. And I encourage, obviously I hope the board as well as the public does come out next week when we have our first budget 101, because we will be getting much more into the process, and getting digging a little bit deeper into some of the topics we started to speak about tonight with the board.
And then our objective, that Maureen and I started talking about last year, is to make sure we provided some scenarios, for, what does, looking at a few things, throughout the budget that we have, some control over. There are many things we don't, but certainly not focusing on one, solo strategy, but really looking at a comprehensive, multidimensional strategy, that is long-term, and that, we really do sort of lay out, very clearly why those are choices, and which, if we don't look at a more comprehensive strategy, we're back to the very tough budget, discussion we had, to establish the 2020 and 21 school year. I had a conversation this morning with an administrator who said, Valerie, tell me that you're not asking us to make more cuts to the budget to balance the budget. And I said, I know you have nothing to cut. So, that's sort of like the starting point in the discussion. They have nothing to cut from their budgets. And so we really do need to think about, what, the long-term, aspirations of the school system, and how we make that happen. And we have been talking around the development of a portrait of a graduate, and we'll be bringing forth, that presentation, as well as the strategic planning work, which is the implementation of a portrait of a graduate, which is really the embodiment of, what do we need to do in our system, and in a wonderful system. Every system, has been looking at this. The world has changed dramatically. How does, has the school changed in ways to reflect those dramatic changes? And then what kinds of conversations does a system that is, has, a history of high performance, do to get ready for that conversation. So that's exciting, important work. The aspirational work is always important, and you have to have a budget that reflects that aspiration. So that's the conversation, that we look forward to continuing.
And again, I hope everyone has an opportunity to look through the slide deck. And again, if you have any questions, and, we're being, hopefully you'll notice they're hopefully optimistic that that we'll see some, additional aid flowing through the state. But again, as Valerie and we've discussed, I think, of course, it's important that, that some of that funding be restored. And I think last year was really actually, I mean, I know I've said this probably before, but definitely in my time, the hardest budget year that we've ever faced. I mean, of course, it's a pandemic, so it was a very unusual and a lot of unknowns in terms of our revenues, but it is important for us to have a larger plan, so that we don't end up in that, type of situation where, we're making a tremendous amount of reductions. And I would agree, in looking at where all the buildings are, it would be they'd really be cutting tremendously into the program. So I think we're, not starting from that place. We're starting from where, we want everyone to present what their needs are, and we're going to work it from there, instead of kind of in that reverse model of trying to pin to a number. So that's the plan moving forward. And again, I hope people are able to join virtually next week, the Budget 101, and we'll have further discussions about that.
Thank you, Maureen and Valerie. I just want to confirm too that those will be recorded. Is that right?
Yes.
So that if you are unable, that information about the Budget 101 will be out and posted in the Hastings Daily, but that if you are unable to attend, they will be recorded and put on our website for future viewing.
What's nice about the Budget 101s, it allows for a little bit more interaction with the meaning the residents, but they are absolutely available there as well. Thank you.
So Maureen, you're still in the spotlight. You're next to share with us any construction project updates.
Yes, so tonight I just really had one update. I didn't, there was nothing really happening between the last meeting and this meeting, except for the fact that we finally did receive our building permit on Hillside project. So that is the big news. We did receive that last week, and we the bid is already out in the newspaper, and there will be we're starting the process. So again, we hope, as we've been hoping since the delay, to get this work started around the February break. So we're still looking at that to be locked in on that time frame. We'll be receiving bids when we return in January from our holiday break, and hopefully we'll be able to, at that point, move forward and award a contract. So long time coming, but we do have the permit in hand, so that's good news. And then I think the last week we also just kind of gave an update on the auditorium and the music suite. And again, those are in further development. So by the next board meeting, I can kind of update you on any other changes in that, or any updates rather to that work and timeframe. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. That is big news to have the permit in hand. That's not.
I actually got it right now.
Thank you. And it's really, I think it's really great to have that progress moving forward, and it's certainly something that's a piece that's aspirational that keeps me motivated, knowing that we're developing an investment in our facilities in Hillside. We have some new business this evening from that's a result of the ongoing policy audit that's been facilitated through NISBA. And there are 5 pieces of policy that are included on our agenda tonight as a first read. Some of them are combinations. If you look at the headings of each one, combinations of several policies into more clarity. And then others are rescinding, following up on the rescinding recommendations that came forward to us. So I don't know if there's any that require elaboration, Valerie, or if any stand out that need our attention.
So I'll just remind everyone that the strategy that we're using to sort of tackle the NISBA compliance audit was to start with the first batch of policies, which were really board-related policies as a basis of moving forward in kind of, chunking that whole document, which includes some new policies, which are, sort of the next sort of set of policies that will be brought forth after December 21st. We'll present them. So the policy committee, as I mentioned, will meet next on the 21st. We'll approach those new policies. And one of those new policies is the pandemic policy that Maureen mentioned. So we'll be ahead of the game in terms of the adoption of that, which is due in April. But this first collection of policies, we felt, were, ones that were manageable with regards to being able to add them all tonight. So, so basically, we either accepted the recension recommendation or rejected it, or we incorporated certain policies into existing policies. So starting with 0350, we rescinded the language because it currently exists in policy 3120. So that change was made. The next policy is policy 1000, which is the community relations in relations with other schools. we simply included the language. Formerly policy 1600 was inserted here. That's relations with municipal governments. It was important to remember that and keep that. The next policy, policy 2100, is actually the policy that stands. Policy 2110 was rescinded because it is a part of the policy 2100. So that was the change made there. Policy 2265 had an interesting name, so it was hard for us to sort of grasp what exactly it was. So it was called originally School Liaison Committees to the Principals. That was, a little amorphous. So digging a little deeper, it actually is the Commissioner's Regulation 100.11, which is school-based planning and shared decision-making, so that each school does have its building leadership team, which is a shared decision-making team. So it's community members working with the schools, with the building leaders, and some teachers on that team to actually work on projects that are in service and in interest to children. So what we did was to change the language to school-based planning and shared decision-making, and inserted the reference to the Commissioner's Regulation. Policy 2551, attendance by board members at conferences and convention workshops. We simply took some language from an existing policy, which had to do with just indicating that the particular types of conferences that the board would attend included the New York State School Boards Association, the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, and any other relevant associations that support the work of the board. So we felt that that was important to insert into that to the existing policy. The other policies that we did actually that we kept intact, there were a couple. One was the principles of school board members. We felt that that laid out sort of a philosophy that was very important to articulate about the board's work. So that's policy 2112, principles for school board members, which sort of, as I said, lays sort of a moral and ethical foundation for the board. So we felt that that one should remain. And again, all of this work is governed by our legal counsel. There is one of the attorneys for Keenan Bean is Suzanne Volpe. So her area of specialization is to help districts who are working through either revamping or revising certain policies. So she's been very helpful in all of this. She helped with sort of the strategy around how to take the compliance audit and actually figure out how to work through it. Policy 2240 is Superintendent Board of Education Relations. That was one that NYSBA suggested that we rescind. However, similar to the previous decision not to rescind policies that really state a belief system around the working relationship between the superintendent and the board. So we decided not to rescind it. A policy that we did rescind because it still exists, as I mentioned earlier, was that policy 2100, which exists under policy 2110. So that takes care of, and one more policy 0350, as I said, did exist under current policy 3120. So that's the first read of these policies, and the process is that they are read again at the December 21st board meeting, and after, if there's if there are no other changes that need to be made, they then are adopted, and Melissa sends them to NYSBA. NYSBA is the organization that maintains our policy manual, so they will be added to the policy manual.
Thank you, Valerie. Are there any questions this evening regarding the suggestions for these 5 policies? And if there aren't this evening, you can also read through them and come forward with any questions or concerns at our next meeting on December 21st. All right, so we will move on to the second public comment period. In this public comment period, please state your name and if you're a resident of Hastings. You may comment on any district business, and in this comment period, please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you. Please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, and Melissa De Libera will call on you to speak.
Jennifer Destin. You have to unmute yourself, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Jennifer Destin, 140 Fairmont Avenue. I wanted to follow up on 2 points tonight. The first is, and it's going back to some of the comments in the beginning, I want to make it clear, I don't have a child in the first grade, nor in any of the transition years that I think are maybe so challenging. And in fact, I'm lucky in a way because as a parent of a daughter with an IEP, my daughter has the benefit of going to school 5 days a week. But what I do have and what my role has meant over the years is that I hear a lot and I listen a lot. And I know that we have heard a lot about the challenges for younger students. And I just don't want us to forget that just because we don't hear as loudly the challenges that older students are having doesn't mean that they don't exist. Just because a child can sit in front of a computer or learn in some way remotely doesn't mean that this pandemic is not having an impact. And I just please ask that if the small bucket of funds that we seem to have, and I know are an issue, as we seek to spend them, that we say, if we're going to spend X per first grader to open the school, if there are additional charges to do that we think about what other things could be done with that X per child in other important grades. And what those grades might need might look very different than being all in, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be under consideration. My second comment has to do with the notion of—
You need to wrap up. You have 10 more seconds.
Okay, all I'm saying is that to have a truly least restrictive environment, having general education teachers receive inclusive schooling, professional development is key. That's it.
Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Rizzo.
Hey, sorry, it's me again, Barbara Rizzo, 9 Hastings Close. I want to speak on 2 things, hopefully quickly. We heard from teachers earlier asking for quarantine periods before the holidays. And I'm actually kind of for that, but I also have another reason. I think the week before Thanksgiving, there were at least 3 positive staff members at Hillside, which caused at least 5 classes to shut down, including my daughter who had a quarantine through Thanksgiving. And as someone who had to have a 9-year-old quarantined through a holiday weekend, it stinks. We already had shrunken our Thanksgiving due to COVID, and then family members who quarantined themselves and got tested just so that we could have a grandma at the table couldn't come. And so, yeah, it does stink, but it's for the teachers and the good of the children. My other point, when we talk about the money that needs to be spent on certain things, as someone who was part of the process this summer in coming up with the model, you know, Dr. Henning Piedmont spoke earlier that, you know, we might have to spend money for monitors in the middle school in these winter months because of how it's going to be impacted indoor, right? That's based on the current model that was agreed upon. There had to be things that were shifted around again because of the current model that was agreed upon to allow IEP students to be in full time. And that's money that needs to be spent because of the current model that was agreed upon. So before we start spending money on things that were not previously agreed upon, I think we have to make sure our district has the financial capability of keeping its promises to the current model that was agreed upon. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all we had for public comment.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm just going to check myself. I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any comments from the Board of Education this evening?
I have two comments. One is just I want to put something out to other board members. One of the committees that I'm on is the Diversity Committee, which I very much appreciate being on and have for years. But they meet on Thursday mornings early, like at 7:30 or 7:45. And I can never make a meeting at that time since I'm seeing patients at that time. So if there's anyone else who has an interest, I just want to put it out there. I know Sylvia's on the committee, right? Is there anybody else? I'm not sure. So if anyone wants to think about that. And the only other thing is I just, as a comment, would like to say that I'm hoping that we will be able to have some kind of response to the request that the teachers have written and submitted to the board and to Valerie. Whether it's not necessarily saying at this moment tonight, but I think we need to acknowledge the letter and respond to them when we can.
I'd like to also throw a comment in there. We certainly had a lot of public comments about trying to keep balance between the schools. Definitely wanted to talk about things that I think our administration has prioritized with a lot of benefits to our community. And I think we've prioritized our students who are in any sort of special education or EOL needs. And we definitely understood what Coach Rizzo was saying there. Hillside has had a lot of interruptions, but I think there's been a real strong early focus on the special ed students because there are challenges that at-home learning is not the best environment. Giving them 4 days a week while every other student was getting 2 days a week was a real nice focus that I think the administration picked up on real early. Other than that, though, I'm not really picking up on a lot of those comments, and I wanted to share my basic opinion that I didn't see the needs that was being stated there. I think we never really tried to pit the schools against each other. High schools have some very small AP classes. They have some electives. They have some classes with 5, 6, 7 students in it. And I don't think we spend a lot of time trying to compare that to our 20, 22, and 24 person in Hillside. So I don't see where this worry about prioritizing some money this year, because it is universally understood that our elementary age students are in trouble right now. So I am supportive of the way this administration and this board has tried to prioritize kindergarten and now first grade. And I would like it to continue. If there's ways to prioritize second grade, I think that's our next move. I do not feel that we have to start counting spending per student throughout the grades. I think in general, our budget can handle a few more tweaks towards our Hillside age students. Thank you.
I actually just wanted to, I've been thinking about it throughout the meeting. Something Sophia said in the student comments, I wanted to just ask some questions about, because she brought up an interesting idea about if there's so few students at the high school. I don't think it's as big an issue at the elementary school and middle school. I know we got the numbers recently. The high school was 40% remote right now. And she said there were 2 kids in her class. I don't know if that's because it was an elective with small numbers of people, or if we're seeing that in a lot of different classes. But so two questions. One, if we really do have 4 or 5 kids showing up to classes in person, she had said that there was some chatter about, well, the kids who are showing up, why can't they just go every day? And that brings up another question of, if we have 40% that are all remote, but we only have a couple kids in each class, are there tons of absences being called in, or is the number of all remote higher? Or it must be that she's talking about an elective. But do you have any insight to that, Melissa? I saw you shaking your head and just trying to understand. I mean, I understand the reason that the number of all remote has gone up, but if there are students that want to go in more days and they're literally sitting there with 2 other kids in a classroom, then why can't they come in the other 2 days?
Before you respond, Melissa, I'm sorry, Melissa De La Barrera, would you be able to let Allison Andrews back into the meeting? She got kicked out and can't get back in. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So we have to monitor daily the number of students who are learning remotely and who are learning in person. And actually that is a report that, that Valerie has to submit every single day to New York State. Recently, the number of students who are learning remotely has gone up. It's hard to know for sure if it's going to go back down. We are all suspecting that it has to do with the period now around Thanksgiving, around the holidays, around the winter season. So one of the challenges would be the need to have a more firm commitment around whether people will be out or in before we could make a more permanent decision around that. We've been pretty flexible initially when we put out in our Hastings reopening plan around how parents reserve the right to go remote, which is something that was in the governor's guidance and the state guidance. We had asked for people to make a commitment for the quarter. And then we realized that there were some extenuating circumstances and we needed to be more flexible with that. And of course, it is really important to have advance notice because our teachers, their planning is really predicated on knowing, are they doing more work with the hybrid model? Are more students going to be in? What resources do they need to prepare? So we do need to know in advance, and our families have been great about communicating to the building. So overall, we've been doing pretty well with that, with some exceptions. Sometimes, to Sophia's point earlier, students won't come in for one reason or another, but we are not experiencing attendance problems. So students are joining remotely. But to be able to make a shift in terms of the students that are in the hybrid model to becoming more frequently, we would need a bit more consistent information, and we would need to understand if what's trending right now is going to be a bit more permanent.
Thanks, Melissa. Are there any other additional board comments this evening?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the members of the staff who are out either quarantining or who have tested positive. We're thinking of them, and we hope everyone has an easy course of the virus. If they do have it right now, we're thinking of them. And to let the teachers know too that, we all read the letter, and I think there are certain considerations that have to be discussed, but we all hear everyone, and we are all supportive of our teachers. So we'll see where we can go, but there has to be more looked into, as far as I understand.
Thanks, Allison. Yes, I also will just reiterate that the board has received the letter, and it was also helpful to hear it read tonight. The board in general, since the pandemic, has not made decisions on the operational aspects of the district, but rather It's a decision that the superintendent is obligated to do under the guidelines of the state education department. So there's certainly a multitude of considerations, regardless of anyone's opinion, that need to be considered. But I also, there's a small piece of Maureen's very detailed finance report that highlights the fact that we are seeing higher than anticipated sales tax revenue in the county of Westchester in this quarter. We're up $35,000. Is that right, Maureen?
Yeah, yes, I mean, for that one quarter, but
For that one quarter.
We're anticipating like at least a surplus of 100, and we're also up a little bit on our state aid receipts as well.
So I just wanted to point out that it's always good to shop local for the holidays, but even more incentive to shop local in the county for the holidays coming up, because it does provide direct income to our students in our school. So just as you're thinking about any gift giving or celebration buying for the season, shop locally if you can, because it does help. And it's coming up higher than we had anticipated. So keep that up.
I would like to just piggyback on something that Allison said. Also thinking about just acknowledging how sort of every week, I guess, we hear from Valerie about people who have been affected by COVID, tested positive. I know it's affected other people who've had to be out in quarantine, but I'm just thinking of all the people in the district so far for whom it has affected them, and that just to let people know that we are thinking of them. And I very much appreciate it, Valerie, when we hear from you and that you keep us updated on different people when we're aware that they're out because of COVID.
Thank you, and they appreciate knowing that when they hear this, it's heartwarming to be thought of, since they are probably quarantined or even self-isolated rather than, and it's hard for them. And you think about the people who are out, it touches everyone. And so from the classroom to those, folks who, make sure that make certain that the buildings are clean and safe, and they're the first ones since March who've been disinfecting and sanitizing the building. So it takes a lot of people to make school districts run, and they're all involved, they're all dedicated, and there's not a single one that isn't, doesn't care deeply about what they're doing, but they're worn out, they're tired. And so, so that, when they say that, it is in earnest, and it's not, it's not a complaint. But, we do have rules that we have to follow. And so, I look forward to the conversation that we will be having about all of that. It's not that we don't honor and don't appreciate, but we'll make sure that we have the conversation so that we all know, what the parameters are.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Is there a motion to close the Board of Education meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks, Lauren.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.